Alright, so today we're going to talk about 2.4, multiplying and dividing rational number notes. So rational numbers are just like integer numbers. So if a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative, if they're the same signs, you end up with a positive number. And then if it's a negative times a positive or a negative divided by a positive or a positive divided by a negative, you end up with a negative sign. So just like integers, if you have an even number of negatives, it's a positive. If you have an odd number of negatives, it's a negative. So the same with multiplying and dividing. Okay, so looking at number 1, we have a negative times a negative, so 2 negatives, so it's even, so it's a positive. And then we go ahead and multiply. So 8 times 18 is 144. 9 times 25 is 225, and we can reduce that. Another thing we could have done instead of doing this is, hey, I look at my diagonals, and guess what? 9 goes into 9 and 8 into 18. So 9 divided by 9 gives you 1. 18 divided by 9 is 2. And then all I would have to do is erase this and get 8 times 2, which is 16. And then 1 times 25, which is 25. And this would be your answer. Positive 16/25. All right, moving on. So first of all, it's a negative times a positive. So 1 negative, it's odd, so it becomes a negative. Opposite signs becomes a negative. Then I put this 4 over 1. And then we're going to do our butterfly method because it will make it easier. So what goes into 4 and into 16? 4. So if I take 4 divided by 4, I get 1. 16 divided by 4 is 4. Then I take 1 times 9, which is 9. 1 times 4 is 4. And we can reduce that or make it a proper fraction. So that's improper. 4 goes into 9 2 times, and that would be 8, so minus 8. And you get negative 2 and 1/4 as your answer. All right, because it says simplest form, we need to make it proper. Okay, so now we're multiplying. We have a negative times a positive, so that would be a negative answer. But we got to make these improper. So 3 times 7 is 21, plus 3 is 24 over 7. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5 over 2. Then let's do our diagonals because we can cancel things out easier that way. So what goes into 24 and into 2? 2 does, right? So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 24 divided by 2 is 12. And then I think that's all we can do. So then we multiply across because we can look at this diagonal, but nothing goes into 5 and into 7. So then we go ahead and multiply across. So 12 times 5 is 60. 7 times 1 is 7. And then we have to figure out how many 7s go into 60. It's 8 7s. So I minus 56. So I have 8 here. Minus 56. 60 minus 56 is 4. So a negative 8 and 4/7 is my answer. All right, moving on. So now we're going to be doing division. So division, remember if it's a fraction, we skip it, we flip it, and we multiply. So if I skip the first one, well, let's go ahead and see what sign it is. Negative 2/3 divided by 5/9. So negative divided by a positive gives you a negative. So I skip the first one, 2/3, flip the second one, so 9/5, and we multiply. Skip, flip, multiply. Okay, then we do our cross butterflies. Look at our butterflies. 2 and 5, nothing goes into both of those. 9 and 3, oh, 3 goes into both of those. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 5 is 5. And we can reduce this. 5 goes into 6 one time, and we're left with 1/5. So negative 1 and 1/5 would be my answer. Moving on. Okay, so positive divided by negative gives me a negative. Skip it, so 7/13. We flip it. When it's a whole number, it's over 1. So when I flip it, it becomes 1/2. And we multiply it. So if I look 7 and 2, nothing goes into 7 and 2. Nothing goes into 1 and 13. So I can just go ahead and multiply. 7 times 1 is 7. 13 times 2 is 26. So my answer is negative 7/26. Okay, moving on. All right, so they're improper, so I got to make them, or they're proper, so I need to make them improper when we're dividing. So 8 times 5 is 40, plus 5 is 45 over 8. And then 12 times 4 is 48. 48 plus 7 is 55 over 12. And remember, we flip it. So if I flip this, this becomes 12 over 55, and we multiply it. But then let's go back. A negative times a negative gives you a positive, so my answer is going to be positive. Now let's look at our diagonals. So 45 and 55. I know 5 goes into both of those, so I'm going to go ahead and reduce. So 45 divided by 5 is 9. 55 divided by 5 is 11. Okay, then I'm going to look at my other diagonal. Go ahead, and 8 and 12. I know 4 goes into both of those. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. 12 divided by 4 is 3. And we go ahead and multiply. 9 times 3 is 27. 2 times 11 is 22. 22 goes into 27 one time. So 27 minus 22 would give you 5 22s. So my answer is 1 and 5 22s. Okay, all right, moving right along. Now we're multiplying, but we're multiplying decimals, so they're going to take a little longer, but negative times a negative is a positive, and then we're multiplying, so 1.39 times 6.8, right? Okay, so just like normal, you don't really have to worry about the decimals, so I don't have to worry about them yet. So let's just go ahead and multiply. 8 times 9 is 72, carry the 7. 8 times 3 is 24. 24 plus 7 is 31, carry the 3. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 plus 3 is 11. Okay, add a 0. 6 times 9 is 54, carry the 5. 6 times 3 is 18. 18 plus 5 is 23. Carry the 2. This one's gone. 6 times 1 is 6. Plus 2 is 8. So 8. And then we add them. So I get 2, 5, 4, 9. Then we see how many numbers are behind the decimal to decide how many number places we go back. So I have 8, I have 9, and I have 3 behind the decimal, right? So 8's behind the decimal, 3 and 9 are behind the decimal. So I have 3 numbers behind the decimal, so I start here and I move it over 3 places. So my answer would be 9.452. Alright, so moving on. When you divide by a decimal, so a negative divided by a positive is a negative, I know my answer, then we set it up like a box, okay? So 10, the first number goes in the box, the second number goes outside. Okay, but you cannot divide by a decimal on the outside. So if there is a decimal on the outside of your box, you have to change it to a whole number. So I'm going to have to move this decimal over 1, 2. What you do on the outside, you have to do the inside. So if I move it over 2 there, I have to move it over 2 here. If there are no numbers here, I add zeros. Okay? So then this new problem becomes 22 divided by 1,000. Okay? Then you just go through it in step by step. So 22 goes into 100. It doesn't go into 10, so I'm going to go to 100. 22 goes into 100 4 times, and that would be 88. Then we subtract it, we borrow. 10 minus 8 is 2. 9 minus 8 is 1. Drop down my 0. 22 goes into 120. 5 times, so 5, and so that would be 110. So I subtract that, I get 10. Add a 0, drop that down. 22 goes into, okay, when you add a 0, remember you have to add a decimal and you have to bring that decimal up top, and then you bring that 0 down. 22 goes into 100 again 4 times. That's 88. Subtract it, you should get 120 again, add that 0, drop it down, so 22 goes into 120 5 times. Oh no, we're seeing a pattern. That 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5 is going to repeat over and over, because if I subtract 110, I'm going to get 10, and then it's 100, and then I get a 4 times again. So remember, when you get a repeating decimal, you go ahead and put a line over what's repeating. So that 45 is repeating over and over. So it's 45.45, and then we decided earlier it's going to be a negative, and so my answer is negative 45.45 as my answer. Okay, so one big thing is, remember, if there is a decimal outside the box when you're dividing, that decimal, you have to make it a whole number, so you have to move the decimal over. But what you do to the outside, you have to do to the inside. All right, moving on, number 9. Okay, same thing. So I have 12.166 in the box divided by 1.54. So a negative divided by a negative is a positive because they're the same sign. And then I'm going to go ahead. I have to move this over twice, so I'm going to move this over twice. So I end up with 1,216. And the 0.6 and 154. It is okay to have a decimal inside the box, but not outside. All right, so how many times does 154 go into 1? 0 times. 12, 0 times. 121, 0 times. So now we have to think, how many times does 154 go into 1,216? So go ahead, mess with it, and let's see what you get. You should get 7 because if you go over, if you get more, it's gonna be over. So 7, so that's 1,078, and so we subtract that. So 1,216 minus 1,078, 1,078, you get 138, and then you drop that 6 down. Oh, I'm hitting that decimal, so I move that decimal up, okay? Then we have 1,386, and how many times did that 154 go in? Go ahead and play with it a little bit. You should get 9, which would be exactly 1,386. Okay, and that would be 0 remainder. My answer should be positive 7.9. All right. So, moving on to the word problem, last but not least. In a game of tug of war, your team changes -1 and 3/10 feet in position every 10 seconds. What is your change in position after 30 seconds? So, every second you're changing, right, in feet, -1 and 3/10, or every 10 seconds, right? So, how many 10 seconds go into 30 seconds? 3, right? Okay, so every 10 seconds you're going -1 and 3/10. So you could think of this as an addition problem. So first 10 seconds, -1 and 3/10. Second 10 seconds, -1 and 3/10. Third 10 seconds, -3 and -1 and 3/10. And then you combined all of them. Okay, but the easier way is, what are we really doing? Multiplication. So we're multiplying by 3. Okay, so if we're multiplying by 3, we just go ahead and step through that process. So first step, let's make this improper. So 10 times 1 plus 3, so I get 13 over 10 times 3 over 1. This is a negative and a positive, so my answer should be a negative. And we don't have any same signs, so 3 times 13 is 39. 10 times 1 is 10. And let's go ahead and make this proper. So 10 goes into 39 3 times, and then we have left 9/10. And it's going to be a negative, and since it's a word problem, we have a label. It should be feet. So -3 and 9/10 feet after 30 seconds is the position. All right, that is 2.4.